Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Reset Podcast. I'm your host, Lauren Mignot, CEO of the experience agency D-Flash. This is part of my 29 Days of Magic series where I get to interview a phenomenal Black woman a day for Black History Month in February. This week's episode is fantastic. I've got Zoe Bogan, who's corporate development with a focus on integration at KPMG. She'll tell us what that all means and how she got there and what she's doing now and some of the awesome initiatives that she's running. It's going to be a great conversation. Take a listen. Hey, Zoe.
Hello, how are you?
You are way too giddy for a Monday morning.
I had my coffee. I'm good.
Yeah. See, I haven't. So, but I will soon enough. But super psyched to have you on the show. And as you know, because you've been listening very diligently, the first question is always the same, and I'm always fascinated by the answers. And so, Zoe, what was your first job?
Yes, very good question. So my first job was I worked at a summer program for kids, and it was about 2 months, and I worked at the program through a church and did that, and I worked with the younger kids. So they were in the age of maybe like 4 to 5. So that was a very interesting experience. But that was my first introduction to working and getting a paycheck and having a job and working with people.
And how old were you?
I was about 14 or 15, between 14 and 15.
Wow. And what was the thing you learned out of that experience?
People management, because if you can manage 4-year-olds, you can manage the world. So you have to have, that's right, you have to have the right content, the right energy, the right things in place. So that really kind of taught me how to manage people and have an appreciation for that. So, yep.
Wow. So, yeah, I think that's going to go on like a tweet. If you can manage 4-year-olds, you can manage anything.
Yep.
Because obviously, temperamental, indecisive, but adorable. And we'll find ways to drive you crazy in new and interesting ways. And managing that, if you can do that, you can do anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So after you managed 4-year-olds and had them all become, Zoe students, how did we get to having this conversation right now? What is it? What's been your journey like?
So it's interesting. So I had a number of jobs in between there, right? So from working at a mortgage broker to, again, working at another school, working as an operations manager and director, and then kind of like at KPMG. And my journey at KPMG has been very interesting. So I've been at KPMG for a little over 10 years, and time flies. It's very interesting. And while at the firm, I held a number of roles. So I've been here about 10 years, but had about 3 roles. And I think that my secret sauce has to deal with paying attention to cues, understanding where there is a need, and being able to execute. Now, going back to my time working at the summer program, my passion continues to always be community, diversity, and specifically women. So we'll talk about a little bit later how I kind of morphed all that into what my next career will be at KPMG that I'm working on. But again, I held a number of roles before I've been at KPMG, and even throughout KPMG, held a few roles, but I think each of them really prepared me for what I'm about to do next.
Awesome. And so how did you get into KPMG? Because I'm sure lots of folks have heard of KPMG and like, oh, they're big, but I'm not sure what they do. So how did that all come together?
No, great question. So I actually got through KPMG through a temp agency, and I was working on a proposal project. And the proposal project was a year-long proposal project, and they actually hired me after the project. It was great experience, but you can go through KPMG through a number of ways. So we have a campus recruiting, experience recruiting, we have a referral program. There are a number of ways to get into KPMG, and you do not necessarily, well, you don't need to have a CPA or an accounting degree to work at KPMG. There are a number of HR functions, marketing functions, and even on the accounting side, a CPA is not always needed. And that's really interesting because the accounting profession is so diverse now and has grown so much more than we initially thought. So I encourage people to definitely apply and look into it.
Yeah, because I think oftentimes folks feel like they hear big accounting firm and then go, oh wait, I don't have that kind of degree. I have nowhere to even I don't even want to try. And you're saying you've got to try.
Yeah, absolutely. So, for instance, as an example, we have a group within KPMG that focuses on culture, and they help companies assess their culture and their talent. Like, that's interesting. You know what I mean? It doesn't necessarily have to do with numbers per se, but look at how exciting that is. It's people based. So, there are a lot of other areas like that that people should definitely look into.
Awesome. And so what are you doing now?
Hmm. So I will say this, the last 4 years of my time at KPMG, as I said, have been focused on corporate development integration. And what that means is the firm looks at companies to purchase, and my team helps to make sure that they're integrated properly. And what that means is looking at the people, are they going to be a good cultural fit? Do we sell the same? Does our technology align? Are there any risks associated with this? So I found that to kind of be very interesting. We acquired some very interesting companies, from a cyber business to a bookkeeping business, very interesting things. But as I thought about what was next for me, I looked at the companies we looked at and said, you know what? Women entrepreneurs really need to kind of get a skin in this game a little bit more so. And I would like to take my platform, my resources, and what I learned to really help women entrepreneurs get what they need. And getting what they need means partnerships or exit. Getting what they need is like a financial assessment of what their business is, standing up their business, infrastructure. Do they have the right talent? I want to really have an accelerator program for women entrepreneurs that is impactful and that makes a difference. So that is my focus next.
Wow. And that means Zoe's got some awesome power. uh, and so you've been able to sort of, how have you been able to stay within a company for 10 years? Because I think oftentimes, you know, it's the universe of like, oh, should I be an entrepreneur or leave my stable job and become an entrepreneur? So what makes you stay and continue to revise and morph your roles at the company?
You know what? That term entrepreneur is really powerful, and we just had a topic on that for our Black History Month celebration. But it's real, and it's really how you reinvent yourself. Now, let me give you specific examples in terms of how that benefited me. I have always been a part of our women's network. I sit on the leadership council, and we've done some really creative things. One thing that we've done was we partner with an organization called the Global Give Back Circle, which provides mentors to young women in Kenya. And so a few of us got the opportunity to travel to Kenya to visit our mentees. That's reinventing. You know what I mean? All in the span of KPMG. Created another initiative internally at KPMG to say, you know what? Sponsorship and mentorship are really important, but you know what really gets you into the C-suite? Revenue. We're going to change it up and have a body language sales course for our women to teach them how to sell. That's what gets you in. Focusing on young girls. So we partnered with like Girls Inc. So it's twofold. It has to do with me paying attention to social cues. It also has to do with me saying, you know what, here is what I want to do, and speaking up and reinventing myself and making it exciting. And so that is kind of like how I did it. Even with this role that I'm speaking about now, had an idea in terms of how it can impact the firm, spoke to a few people, they helped me flesh it out a little bit more and said, okay, let's do it. But you have to be willing to speak up, and you have to understand the importance of execution.
Yeah, well, it's always about the fact that if you're able to not only speak up, but then back up what you say with doing great work.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think oftentimes folks think, oh, if they just do the work, people will see, and it's like,
No,
no. like
no.
I love for you to talk about the fact that you said a really important thing about understanding social cues.
No, absolutely. You have to pay attention to how things are shifting in a corporate organization. So, what new initiatives are coming out, and how will that affect you? What is the temperament or the leadership style of the people that you're working with? Who's innovative? Who is not? How are you going to get the leadership skills you need to take to the next level? You know what I mean? How is the company shifting? all of those things really matter. They really matter, and people really need to kind of pay attention to that. And back to your point in terms of, people, doing your work and people will see you. Women can't afford to do that anymore. And women of color definitely cannot afford to do that anymore. You don't necessarily have to kind of speak up in a way that you feel will not be accepted by those in your sphere, however you may feel that is. But you definitely need to make sure that you are tooting your own horn. You can do that in a number of ways. So, like a lot of times, we're telling people to make sure you get on a panel, right? So, because once you get on a panel, you're now a subject matter expert. You're
Right.
saying something without saying something. So even if you're not comfortable, speaking to somebody and say, "Oh, I'm doing all these great things," you can do it in subtle ways. But you really need to make sure that you're speaking up.
It's so important. And I think
Mm-hmm.
this is oftentimes so difficult for especially younger folk because they don't know like how's that balance between speaking up, sounding like an obnoxious millennial or zennial, and also being like, okay, but like I know my stuff here because I actually have studied this or I've done the research and I'm an expert at this.
No, absolutely. And you know what? It's not just with younger women. As I speak to older women, they still have that feeling. And I'll give you an example. So I was at an event one time, and there was a gentleman, I believe he was a managing director, and he was this senior manager about a client opportunity that became available. So a few people were going overseas to this client opportunity. He said, "You know what? Well, I can't go. So why don't you take my place?" And email, the guy and just tell him you'll take my place. And the dialogue between the two of them back and forth in terms of, "Oh, well, do you think I should email him?" He was like, "Yeah, email him right now." "Well, what do you think he'll say?" And just to a certain extent, how we second guess ourselves is detrimental. But the great thing about him is that he wouldn't take no for an answer. He wouldn't take no for an answer. And following that conversation, he emailed me a few days later and said, "You know what? You'll be happy to know that she is now overseas at that meeting." And that is what an ally is. You talk about allies, we all have different backgrounds as women, as black women, but we're not always comfortable saying yes. You know what I mean? We're viewed differently, but it's important continue to speak up. And I always love it when I see allies showing up for other people. I'm like, "No, you deserve a seat at that table. You go for it. And here's how I'm going to support you." And getting that email from him was really great because he got it.
Yeah, I think that's the kind of the key thing about, especially when people are in corporate, is like who are your allies?
Mhm.
Who it can sometimes be other women, it can also be other men, it can be other men of different races and different generations, um, who see you, and oftentimes it's you don't know who's actually rooting for you in the rooms that you're not in.
Right.
But building those relationships and fostering those relationships are the key to any type of success. And I think we have to be very mindful of that. And take a take a moment to see who can be an ally with you and build those relationships, and not look at like not that you're like not fitting in, or you're gonna try and do something what you think is well, if you do that then you're just like selling out to the man. It's like, it's called I'm networking and building relationships.
And you have to, and we can't afford not to. Because here's the thing, they have different type of resources and contacts that we don't. You have to diversify your network if you really want to succeed. And just stay in a bubble. It's not gonna work.
No, it won't work. So I'm sure in the years you've been at KPMG, you've probably come across some challenges. So what's been a challenge that you encountered while you were at KPMG, and then how did you find your way through it, and what did you learn?
You know, Great question. And so I had a number of challenges. So there were in the past like roles that I applied for that I didn't get. You know what I mean? And that is like defeating. And I remember I had one friend in HR and said, "You know what? Why don't we kind of analyze why you're not getting the roles?" And I actually listed a lot of some of the roles that I applied for over the past years. And I was like, "Well, wow, um, this is really defeating me." And so, yeah, I would say that when I applied for roles at the firm and didn't get it, that was sometimes a little alarming to me. But you know what happens? The next opportunity was always a little bit better. But the thing I had to do and how I got through it was a good support system of people that I can talk to. Just really authentic friends to say, you know what? Okay, let's unpackage what happened here. This does not mean that you're unworthy. This does not mean that you do not necessarily belong at the firm. There is something better. Let's do what it looks like next. So I think just having a great cheerleading squad, and just perseverance, grit will help everything.
Yeah, it's also one of those things where you like, when it's for you, it's for you,
Right.
sometimes it's really, really, really hard a pill to swallow, especially when you put all this time, you put all this effort in, but that thing that you thought was supposed to be for you just wasn't for you, and as you said, that opportunity that came through always ended up being better,
Right.
and having that resiliency is just key, because oftentimes people get so defeated and they don't want to get back up, and it's great to hear that you're like, yep, well, that sucked. So let me
Oh,
move on.
absolutely, absolutely. I had a friend tell me one time, you're Zoe Bogan. I'm like, I am Zoe Bogan. Act like it. Yes. Get back out
Exactly.
there. Get back out there. So yes, I get it.
It's not hard. I mean, look, we're all human, and we're all like, when we think we want something and it doesn't go our way, we're totally within our rights to sulk about it. But give yourself 24 hours, dust yourself off, and then go to the next one.
Right.
So what would you tell 25-year-old Zoe?
So that's a great question. And I would tell her that you are good enough just as you are. A lot of times I always felt that, you know what, like once I get this role, then I'll be good enough. Oh, no, no, no. Once I get this role, then I'll be good enough. And sometimes you just need to sit and say, right now, where I am in this present moment, I am good enough, I am full, and I am present. And there will be other things in life where I'll get promotions, advancements, but those things don't necessarily define who I am and where, and my contribution to the world. So, what I would say is that, you know what? Right now, your essence of who you are good enough. Take those tips and go do whatever you want to do. But don't necessarily think that once you get that title or promotion or house or whatever thing it is, that then you'll be good enough. No, you're good enough right now.
Awesome. I think that, it's interesting, having, doing this 29 Days of Magic, that's a really important theme that keeps coming back up, as a number of women have mentioned that, like, that's what they would have told their 25-year-old selves, because, it takes us a long time, especially as Black women in business, to be like, yeah, I'm not going to sacrifice me anymore. like,
Right.
like, this is who I am. This is how I'm doing this. And if you don't like it, I'm going to tell you. So,
Right.
but it's hard. And how did you get to a point where you realized that you were enough?
You know what? It's still a work in progress. I'm not going to say that, I'm 100% there, but I'm starting to be a little bit more conscious, and I'm just starting to kind of maybe meditate a little bit more, talk to myself a little bit more, but it's a work in progress. It is a constant it's a work in progress.
Same, no shade, no shade at all. Yeah, I think it's funny because you have to it's the same thing when you were saying what your friend was like, you're Zoe Bogan. It's like you forget the things that you do and how many other people have tried and failed, and you're actually sitting on top of the mountain and you don't even realize it.
That is true. And you know what? Sometimes you do not understand your impact until you hear how other people talk about you. People are always kinder to us than we are to ourselves. And we all need to stop that. Again, myself included. We're very hard on ourselves. And if anybody was as hard on us as we were on ourselves, we wouldn't even be friends with them.
Right.
We really need to work on being a little bit more kinder to ourselves. And that's what I'm working on too.
it's a process.
It is a process.
But yeah, it's like you never know. It really is interesting because like you just never know the fact that someone heard you speak
Mhm.
or went to a program that you were working on, and or just saw you, because I think oftentimes just seeing your face as someone who works for KPMG, in a pretty awesome role, what that does for other women, especially for other Black women.
Right, absolutely, absolutely. And my role is, listen, my role is not necessarily just about me. It is, for those beside me, and even those behind me as well. I really want to create a space for women and Black women in this area. And I just want us to, get in and do our thing. So yes.
And so, what's next for you?
Hmm. So what is next? So again, I highlighted that the next transition for me is working to create an accelerated program for women entrepreneurs. And there are a lot of, there are a few accelerated programs out there, but here is how this is different. This is speaking to the key issues that women entrepreneurs face. It's funding, it's tax incentive, it's talent assessment, it's business infrastructure, and going through it. We want their business to be stronger and we want them to get what they need. As an example, female entrepreneurs, even though they are the fastest growing group, still receives funding of less than 3%. And what's interesting is that in 2019, it decreased. So here we
Crazy.
are talking about female
And
entrepreneurs. We
not doing anything.
highlight, yeah, we highlight, oh, listen, they have great returns, but then they don't get the access to funding. And that goes into what we talked about earlier. That's about resources and networking. And we really need to break down those barriers and get some of these allies involved so that number shifts. We're talking about double digits. We're talking about in 2020, less than access to funding. It's crazy. I want to make an impact on that. I really want to shift that. I want it to be a little bit more equitable. And I want to ensure that all innovative ideas are funded and supported. We deserve it.
Absolutely. And so, how far along? So, is the accelerated programs coming this summer or fall? What's the scheduling?
Yes, the scheduling is late summer, fall. Really excited about that. We will have our first class in. I will make sure to do a follow up with you after our first class and maybe get some testimonials. And
Awesome.
I want you to look out to see how many women businesses we get funded, and at least have their businesses be stronger. So I'm excited.
And so for the accelerator, so you're going to build the criteria for the type of companies that you guys are looking for, but the goal is to get everybody really the actionable skills to go out and fundraise, but also be able to manage the accounting and the sort of business services, the guts of the business. Because I think oftentimes folks focus on like, I have this awesome idea, isn't that amazing? Forgetting money and operations are key to your idea actually working.
Absolutely. We are removing the blindfold. You come in there, you're going to understanding what your financials are saying to an investor. So remove your hands from your eyes. We're going to look at it and talk about it. And listen, nothing is bad or good. You just now know powerfully how you have to shift things or how you need to change the language. Another great thing, I told you that we kind of like acquired companies. Another great service we have, a small bookkeeping service, and it's for startups. It is for startups bookkeeping service. It's online, it's automated. And the great thing about it is, not just a package, you have a whole KPMG team that's supporting you. Now you're in the fold. So there are a number of things, but your point, we want to make sure that they're not only that they have that great idea, but the financials are strong. The operations are strong. And when you are speaking to investors, you are unwavering about who you are as a business now and your projections in the future. And there's power in that.
It's so important. And I think that oftentimes, when we look at the fundraising numbers and you're like, well, why in the world are these numbers not moving? And it's networks and it's access. And, I think having a program that, again, is run by KPMG, which already has, a big stamp in this universe, already gives them a stamp of approval and a boost forward.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Uh,
Absolutely.
So when you're ready, we'll put all those details in the show notes so that people can know that it's to follow you, so that when you make the announcement of when you start accepting applications, so folks will be able to find you and let them know, because I think this is a phenomenal program and desperately needed in our industry to help female-founded businesses get to that next level. It's like, we can complain about X company getting X millions of dollars because it's run by two white men versus here's some programs that can be like, go through this and we'll get you that same kind of money. So like,
That's right. We are building up real concrete support for this. And I'm excited about that. And I cannot wait to share information about the details.
Fantastic. So last question for you, Lady Zoe. As part of 29 Days of Magic, I end every session now with, two things before that. Before I forget, what's your self-care routine? Because what do you do to take care of yourself?
So a few things. One, I work out. And it makes me feel really great, and it's a part of my routine and I love it. And I'm not going to sacrifice that. I also started to get acupuncture, which I love.
Wow, really? You love getting needles sticking to you?
It's really interesting. So I'll give you an example. So, and I was telling him about an instance where my train was 3 hours delayed. I mean, I was sitting on the train for 3 hours. I was so frustrating. And he said to me, there are no mistakes in anything. Who are you supposed to meet there? And I said, okay, help me put everything in perspective. And I think from the acupuncture, I'm a little bit calmer, and definitely from working out, it just allows me to kind of train differently. You need to, when you are working to kind of create and build and have impact and change, you need an outlet to get it out. And so working out for me really helps, and it's necessary.
Yes, that hour or so that you can have is Zoe time is key and necessary, because we're all so busy and we don't take care of ourselves, especially as Black women, because we're like, we will move the world ourselves. So anytime you can like break away, and like I said, like, this is part of the reason why I always ask it. I want women, especially who are listening, to be like, okay, these women are bosses, but like they still know they've got to take some time for themselves, and they can't be working 70 hours a week because it'll kill you.
Yeah, and you know what? You can't even create, because when you're creating something, you have to step away and look at it and come back with fresh eyes. And when you're so inundated like that, you can't even create. And so you're missing things.
Yeah, because your mind is going 11,000 miles a minute, as opposed to like having that time for yourself where you can be like, oh, like some of my best ideas over the years have kind of come when I go on like a walk and like just get some fresh air, and I'm just like, walking by the West Side Highway or on the Esplanade, and just sort of like looking at the water and, listening to some music, and then, having that bit of calm where I'm not checking my phone every 5 minutes.
Right.
Because that's where, that time for yourself is just so key. So I'm glad to hear that that you do take some good time for yourself. So
it is
yay.
a must.
So, and as part of 29 Days of Magic, we have a give and an ask section of the show. So if there's something you'd like to give to our audience, or ask of our audience, or ask of the universe, this is the time for it.
Okay, so here, let me do this. I am going to ask the audience to make sure you speak about this program that KPMG is doing to support women entrepreneurs emphatically. Speak about it to everyone. And I am going to ask the universe for a platform to really knock it out the park. Like, we are at less than 3% now. By the time I'm finished, I want women funding to be at 25%, and I'm putting it out to the universe. And I want to highlight the impact that I had in this area, because I want to see women entrepreneurs win. And I feel that.
Awesome. I love it. That is fantastic. 25%. You're like, none of this half stuff and 2%. Nah, 25%.
No, that's right. Go big or go home, right?
Exactly. I love that you said that, because I see those funding numbers and I go, ugh. And I think, and you're like, oh, it's incremental change, but like actually, there's enough money out there that if done the right way, you can take a baseball bat to these numbers and
That's
really knock it
right.
and knock them way the hell out. Because the money's there. I think that people seem to think that like somehow that there is this one small pot of money and it's only being carved up in a certain way. And I'm like, no, there's many ways to find a way uh, to do something bigger and grander, and we have to stop thinking small because like
Absolutely.
you've
Absolutely.
got to make an impact otherwise. So we'll definitely put all the details in the show notes of how to keep in contact with you so that when you make the announcement people will know that. We'll absolutely amplify it on our platforms because it's just necessary. So we'll definitely help and support as much as we can.
Sounds great. This has been phenomenal, and I'm excited.
Awesome. So Zoe, it's been such a blast having you on the show. It's always really nice to hear from people who are doing things in corporate, getting the support internally to go big and make an impact. So just an absolute delight to have you on the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and I love what you're doing. Keep it up.
Awesome. And so this is our show. Thanks so much.